Hello and good day, everyone. We are the Group 5 and we are here to discuss about memory processes, specifically the encoding and the transfer of information. So here are the contents of our presentation for today. We're going to discuss first the common operations in memory processing, and then followed by the forms of encoding, and lastly, the transfer of information of short-term memory to long-term memory. And now I'll give the floor to Christine to discuss to us our first topic, which is the common operations in memory processing.
So for today, let's talk about memory processes. I will go deeper on the common operations in memory processing. So let me define what is memory first. Memory is the means by which we retain and draw on our past experiences to use that information in the present. As a process, memory refers to the dynamic mechanisms associated with storing, retaining, and retrieving information about past experience. So for example, there are certain experiences in our childhood that we can still remember up to this day. These experiences can be used or can be compared to our present experiences. Another example would be butang ta may mga tigulang nga gaistoryahanay and there is a possibility nga ma-brought up gid nila ila past experiences. More on reminiscing the past and perfect example ginisa for memory. So let's move forward to the three common operations in memory processing, namely the encoding, the storage, and the retrieval. So encoding is defined as the initial learning of information. You transform sensory data into a form of mental representation. Storage, on the other hand, refers to maintaining information over time. You keep encoded information in memory. Retrieval is the ability to access information when you need it. You pull out or use information stored in memory. So, let me give an example to that. So, you meet someone sa isa ka gathering or occasion. So, nature na sa taho nga mangilala. So, pag may nakilala ka na, you need to encode iya nga name. For example, let's say iya nga name is Lynn Goff. So, while gasturya, ga-build ka bond, naga-associate ka naman na sang iya nga ngalan kag sang iya nga tsura para do ma-familiarize mo gid. After familiarization, dra na sa ma-apply ang encoding. Next one, after sang encoding, kinahanglan mo i-maintain ang information over time para when you see her anytime, makilala mo siya gyapon, dira na ma-apply ang storage. So, when you see her again a week or month after, you need to recognize her face and have it serve as imong cue to retrieve information from the storage para ma-call out mo sa iya nga name. Dra naman na masulod ang retrieval. So, any successful act of remembering requires that all three stages must be intact para ma-recognize mo gid mayo ang isa ka tawo kag hindi mo siya ma-call out other names. However, kung ga-remember ka, there are two types of errors that may occur. These two types of errors are forgetting and misremembering. So, forgetting, this is self-explanatory, like na-forget mo or hindi mo na ma-recall ang names ang na-met mo sa party. On the other hand, misremembering naman niya or false recall or false recognition, you see someone that looks like Lynn Goff and call that person by that name. Bali, may nakita ka kuno nga parehas gid tsura kay Lynn Goff kag gintawag mo sa iyang ngalan pero hindi to siya si Lynn Goff. Amo na sa ang tawag nga false recognition of the face. Or the scenario might be nakita mo ang tudtuod nga Lynn Goff. Na-recognize mo iya nga face but natawag mo siya sa iban nga ngalan nga na-met mo man to sa party. Amo naman na siya ang ginatawag nga misrecall of the name or misrecall of her name.
Encoding and transfer of information. We get information into our brains through a process called encoding, which is the input of information into the memory system. Once we receive sensory information from the environment, our brains label or code it. We organize the information with other similar information and connect new concepts to existing concepts. So, through sa process kuno nga ginatawag nga encoding, dira kita makaget information into our brain. So, once nga makabaton kita sang sensory information halin sa aton nga environment, daw ginabutangan ni siya label or code sang aton nga brain kay siya man na ang naga-organize sang mga informations upod sa iban nga mga nagapalariho nga informations para ma-connect ini sa new concepts to existing concepts. Sensory information fades really quickly and is not unconsciously. As soon as you try to remember something, you're activating your short-term memory. So, kung magambag kita sensory information, dali gid man ni siya madula kag kalabanan daw hindi mo ni mahalata. Also, once ginatry mo remember ang isa ka bagay, gina-activate mo na ang imo nga short-term memory. Short-term memory storage. So, what do we know about short-term memory? Well, short-term memory can receive information from both the sensory and the long-term memory stores. Not extremely long, but a lot longer than sensory memory, has a capacity of about 5 to 9 pieces of information. Kag kung ma-reach na ang capacity, tanan nga information is ma-automatically get replaced. So, when new information enters the short-term memory, we say that there is interference. All this means, of course, nga kung ginatry to remember ang more than 9 things or for period time longer than a half a minute, your short-term memory is gonna be quite unreliable, or in other words, daw hindi ta na madependihan or mapagkatiwalaan ng aton nga short-term memory, something like that. Maintenance rehearsals. We can keep information in our short-term memory is by doing something called maintenance rehearsal. So, this is a strategy for keeping information in short-term memory or for moving it into long-term memory by repeating information over and over. Long-term memory storage. A store for encoded information that can be retrieved as long as you know about it, and in long-term memory, information is encoded by its meaning and stored in semantic networks. And that's just a bit of a tricky way of describing a pattern of nodes that are related to other nodes or centers linked to other centers in our memory stores. When it comes naman sa measurables, though it's a bit difficult to know kung ano ang full duration or ang capacity sang long-term memory, is one reason being that the right retrieval queue can actually cause previously forgotten memories to suddenly just come back. A retrieval queue is a mental reminder, a prompt used to assist recollection. We can store long-term permanent memory, for example, on how to ride a bike or on what all the letters of the alphabet are. These are all forms of long-term memory, but they represent 3 different types. Remember, ang mention kung how to ride a bike is what we would describe as procedural memory. This memory is para sa kung paano mo i-perform ang isa ka tasks, skills, or actions. It's knowing how to do sometimes, although kisado medyo budlay ni i-describe kag usually it's quite resisting to forgetting, but then you've also got memory of facts, events, general knowledge, and this is what we would call declarative memory. Kag may-ari ni siya 2 types, which are apostolic memory, which is often autobiographical. So amo ni siya ang halin sa akong nga perspective. Personalized memories of events, or could even include remembering something for me to do in the future, and semantic memory, which is memories of just facts.
Transfer of information of short-term memory to long-term memory. We encounter two key problems when we transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory. These are interference and decay. Interference versus decay. Interference. When computing information interferes with our storing information. Imagine you have two crime movies with the same actor. You then try to remember the storyline of one of the movies, but mix it up with the second movie. Whereas decay, when we forget facts just because time passes. Given the problems of decay and interference, how do we move the information from short-term memory to long-term memory? The means of moving information depends on whether the information involves declarative memory or non-declarative memory. But first, let's discuss declarative memory. Declarative memory. Entrance into long-term declarative memory may occur through a variety of processes. One method of accomplishing this goal is by deliberately attending to information to comprehend it. Another is by making connections or associations between the new information and what we already know and understand. We make connections by integrating the new data into our existing schemas of stored information. This process of integrating new information into stored information is called consolidation. What is consolidation in declarative information? In humans, the process of consolidating declarative information into memory can continue for many years after the initial experience, by Squire, 1986. When you learn about someone or something, for example, you often integrate new information into your knowledge a long time after you have acquired that knowledge. For example, you may have met a friend many years ago and started organizing that knowledge at that time. But you still acquire new information about that friend, sometimes surprising information, and continue to integrate this new information into your knowledge base. Stress generally impairs the memory functioning. However, stress also can help enhance the consolidation of memory through the release of hormones, by Park et al. 2008, Rusendahl 2002-2003. The disruption of consolidation has been studied effectively in amnesics. Studies have particularly examined people who have suffered brief forms of amnesia as a consequence of electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, by Squire in 1986. For these amnesics, the source of the trauma is clear. Confounding variables can be minimized. A patient history before the trauma can be obtained, and follow-up testing and supervision after the trauma are more likely to be available. A range of studies suggests that during the process of consolidation, our memory is susceptible to disruption and distortion. Meta-memory strategies in consolidation. We may use various meta-memory strategies to preserve or enhance the integrity of memories during consolidation, by Metcalfe, 2000, Waters and Schneider, 2010. Meta-memory strategies involve reflecting on our own memory processes with a view to improving our memory. Such strategies are especially important when we transferring new information to long-term memory by rehearsing it. Meta-memory strategies are just one component of metacognition, our ability to think and control our own processes of thought and ways of enhancing our thinking. And we have our next reporter, Pauline, for non-declarative memory.
Okay, moving forward, in contrast to what was presented by Shanna, we also have here the non-declarative memory. Or this memory is also the implicit memory, ang mga unconscious memory that could actually affect or alter the way a person or individual behaves. So let me read here. Some forms of non-declarative memory are highly volatile and decay quickly, When we say highly volatile, dasig siya mag-change. And decay quickly, of course, dasig ta siya malipatan. So, examples here are priming and habituation. Ang priming, amo ni sa ang mga unconscious triggers sa aton nga environment that gets us to remember, let's say, a specific event and gets us to act in a certain way. For instance, nagalantaw ka television, particularly teleserye. Tapos, may advertisement about steak. Now, wala ka nag-pay attention sa advertisement because what you're waiting for is ang pagbalik on screen sang teleserye. Now, the next day, nag-grocery shopping ka to buy a steak. You are unconscious nga ang decision mo sa pagbakal sang steak was actually influenced by the advertisement, which wala mo man ginhatagan sing attention. That's why you are unconscious. Now, you are primed to buy the steak by the advertisement. So, the other one is habituation. Amo naman isa ang aton nga diminished responses. So, arang over time, bala you become accustomed to a specific stimulus, we pay less attention to it already kay naanad ka na. One example lang aton alarm clock. The first time, wala ka naanad, it's distracting and everything. However, pag naanad ka na, you pay less attention to it. Sometimes, ginapatay ta pa. On the other hand naman, there are other non-declarative forms that are actually maintained more readily, particularly as a result of repeated practice of procedures or repeated conditioning. Bale, sulit-sulit nga practice and sulit-sulit nga conditioning could actually cause these other non-declarative forms to be maintained more readily. And when we say repetition, it has something to do with rehearsal. Now, let's talk more about another topic, which is rehearsal. What is rehearsal? It is actually the repeated recitation of an item. So, it involves repetition, repeated item over and over as a possible way of remembering or learning something. Now, the effects of such rehearsal are actually termed the practice effects. Say, for example, when you do, from the word itself, rehearsal, a dance rehearsal, you repeatedly practice. Wala man ta naga-practice once lang and then perfect na dason or ma-perform ta na sa well. Bisan once lang ang practice. There are cases, but most of the time, nasulit-sulit ta ginaya ang dance rehearsal just so maka-perform ta well. Okay, so rehearsal could be overt or covert. When we say overt, in such case, it is usually allowed of use to anyone watching, meaning overt, observable siya sa iban. When we say covert naman, in which case it is silent and hidden, covered or covert, covered siya. Now, there are actually two main types of rehearsal, namely the elaborative rehearsal and the maintenance rehearsal. But first, let's talk about the elaborative rehearsal. When we say elaborative rehearsal, the individual somehow elaborates the items to be remembered. Such rehearsal makes the items either more meaningfully integrated into what the person already knows or more meaningfully connected to one another and therefore more memorable. More useful in retaining information for longer periods of time, it involves associating new material with information that already exists in long-term memory. With elaborative rehearsal, you need to remember the details for future use, and they often need to be retained in your memory permanently. Elaborative rehearsal is the control processor that takes short-term knowledge and moves it to long-term memory. So when we talk about the elaborative rehearsal, ang keyword na is retaining information for longer periods of time. Say, for example, here, we use mnemonics to memorize the 12 cranial nerves of the brain. Adding 12 cranial nerves, ang ila first letters ang maton gin use to create a, let's say, a meaningful sentence or a sentence that actually makes sense nga masulod ta sa aton nga brain just so we could remember the 12 cranial nerves. Ariyo, say for example, ang olfactory for O, ang tic for trigeminal, family, facial, Hawaii, hypoglossal. So he created this meaningful sentence, O, to take a family vacation, go Vegas and Hawaii. So another example here is listening to a song on repeat until it becomes ingrained in the brain. So, amo nino mag-listen ta sa song repeatedly. Actually, when we listen to a song once lang, kung bago ta pa sa nabatian, we cannot memorize it right away. So, we would need elaborative rehearsal just so we could ingrain it sa aton nga brain. So, the next main type of rehearsal is the maintenance rehearsal. The individual simply repetitively rehearses the items to be repeated. Such rehearsal temporarily maintains information in short-term memory without transferring it or transferring the information to long-term memory. Without any kind of elaboration, the information cannot be organized and transferred. It is effective for maintaining relatively small amounts in memory for brief period but is not likely to affect retention in the long term. So, ang maintenance rehearsal naman, when we say maintenance rehearsal, ang ato naman di keyword, temporarily maintains information in short-term memory. Unlike sa elaborative, ma-store tayong memory or ma-retain ta ang memory for longer periods of time. Ang maintenance, temporarily lang siya. Say for example here, when we use the GCash app, when we want to log in successfully, nag-require siya sang 6-digit OTP. So, in order for us to memorize that, ginasulit-sulit ta siya, gina-rehearse ta sa, ginasulit-sulit ta siya hambal. Because sometimes, ginatamad man ta magbalik-balik sa messages, tapos mabalik naman sa GCash. So, ginasulit-sulit ta siya memorize until nga pwede ta na siya mamutang to kag makalagin ta successfully sa GCash. But notice, kung ma-notice nyo nga after logging in successfully, few minutes pa lang niya malipatan ta na sa ang number. That is an example of maintenance rehearsal in which temporarily lang ga-maintain ang aton information sa short-term memory without transferring the information to long-term memory. So that is maintenance rehearsal.
More than a century ago, Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885, he noticed that the distribution of study or memory rehearsal sessions over time affects the consolidation of information in long-term memory. He identified the spacing effect. The spacing effect, it occurs when information is repeatedly learned over a spaced-out long period, resulting in an individual being about to recall better and remember the information being learned. The greater the distribution of learning trials over time, the more the participants remember over a long period. If lawig ang time na ginhatag for you to study, the more nga mas ma-remember mo ang instudihan mo over a long period. The spacing should ideally be distributed over months rather than days or weeks. It is linked to the process by which memories are consolidated in long-term memory. There are two practices, distributed and mass practice. Distributed practice is learning in which various sessions are spaced over time. For example, studying for an exam in several short sessions over a 2-week period. You will remember much of the material. Sa 2 weeks mo na nga pagtuon, ginasulit-sulit mo na ang mga information, so mas ma-remember mo siya kung ma-recall mo siya. Mass practice, learning in which sessions are crammed together in a very short space of time. For example, studying a night before the exam. You will remember very little and the memory for this material will decay relatively quickly. Ano gan liwat ang decay? Amo ni siya ang when we forget facts just because time passes. Balik ta sa exam. So, dutay na lang ang ma-remember mo nga mga infos kay sanggap ika lang nag-study kag pagkabuas exam na hindi ka nakakonsentrate, gay nagaw or dadali ka na tuon, gabasa ka na lang pero wala. Kinmay gasadad si mo brain. Amo na siya ang mass practice.
Why would distributing learning trials over days make a difference? One possibility is that information is learned in variable contexts. These diverse contexts help strengthen and begin to consolidate it. Another possible answer comes from studies of the influences of sleep on memory. So before we proceed to our main topic, let us first define the following terms. Sleep, a circadian state characterized by partial or total suspension of consciousness, voluntary muscle inhibition, and relative insensitivity to stimulation. So, kung magtulog ta, undergo different processes ang aton lawas, and it happens during the 4 stages of sleep. NREM or the non-rapid eye movement, stage 1, NREM stage 2, NREM stage 3, and ang REM sleep or the rapid eye movement sleep. So in other references, there are 5 stages of sleep. Next is memory consolidation. It is the process where our brains convert short-term memories into long-term ones. Sleep and memory consolidation. A good night's sleep, which includes plenty of REM stage sleep, aids in memory consolidation. So, among the 4 stages of sleep, ang REM stage sleep, kaya ang may pinakadako nga bulig sa memory consolidation. So, the rapid eye movement or the REM sleep is a particular stage of sleep characterized by dreaming and increased brainwave activity a person receives. So, ang REM sleep is gasugod siya about 90 minutes after ta matulugan. In this time, our brain is aroused with mental activities, and your brain's activity most closely resembles its activity during waking hours. This is why ang REM sleep is ginatawag man siya nga active sleep. So during this time man nga na-immobilized or temporarily paralyzed ang aton lawas and gadamgo kita. There is also a rapid eye movement, our muscles relax and heart rate increases, and breathing is rapid and shallow. So other research shows better learning with increases in the proportion of REM stage sleep after exposure to learning situations. This is because during REM sleep, ang aton nga emotions and emotional memories are processed and stored. Ang information nga aton na-acquire is gina-imprint sa aton memory, which makes it an important stage for learning. Specifically, disruptions in REM sleep patterns the night after learning reduce the amount of improvement on the visual discrimination task that occurred relative to normal sleep. Ang positive influence naman sa sleep on memory consolidation is seen across age groups. People who suffer from insomnia or those na may difficulty sa pagtulog have trouble with memory consolidation.
So now let's discuss about neuroscience and memory consolidation. So is there something special occurring in the brain that could explain why REM sleep is so important for memory consolidation? Well, neuropsychological research on animal learning may offer a tentative answer to this question. Recall that the hippocampus has been found to be an important structure for memory. In recording studies of rat hippocampal cells, researchers have found that cells of the hippocampus that were activated during initial learning are reactivated during subsequent periods of sleep. It is as if they are playing the initial learning episode to achieve consolidation into long-term storage. So, before, researchers have conducted a study in which they used rats, and they record the brain activity of the rats, especially sa hippocampus nila. And ang cells ng hippocampus are activated during initial learning or samtang ka-take up sang informations. And ang cell ngayon na, gari-activate sila liwat samtang gatulog ta. And so, samtang gatulog ta, gina-replay ang initial learning naton para ma-convert ang short-term memory into long-term memories sa aton nga long-term storage. So next, this effect has also been observed in humans. So not only on rats, it also has been observed in humans man, ginstudihan man nila ang humans. So after learning routes within a virtual town, participants slept. Increased hippocampal activity was seen during sleep after the person had learned the spatial information. So, same man sa natabo sa rats, no? Samtang sleep ang humans, ga-activate man galing aton nga hippocampus. So, in the people with the most hippocampal activation, there was also an improvement in performance when they needed to recall the routes. So, that's quite self-explanatory na. So, during this increased activity, the hippocampus also shows extremely low levels of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. When patients were given acetylcholine during sleep, they showed impaired memory consolidation, but only for declarative information. Procedural memory consolidation was not affected by acetylcholine levels. So, the hippocampus acts as a rapid learning system. Next, let's talk about the connectionist models of learning. So McClelland and his colleagues have used connectionist models of learning to show that integrating new experiences too rapidly leads to disruptions in long-term memory systems. Thus, the benefits of distributed practice seem to occur because we have a relatively rapid learning system in the hippocampus that becomes activated during sleep. Repeated exposure on subsequent days and repeated reactivation during subsequent periods of sleep help learning. These rapidly learned memories become integrated into our more permanent long-term memory system. And lastly, let's discuss what reconsolidation is. So first of all, consolidation, we know that it's the process of converting our short-term memories into long-term ones. It is also the process that makes memories less likely to undergo either interference or decay. However, after a memory is called back into consciousness, it may return to a more unstable state. And in this state, the memory that was consolidated may again fall victim into interference or decay. To prevent this loss, a process of reconsolidation takes place. So reconsolidation has the same effect that consolidation does, but it is completed on previously encoded information. It does not necessarily occur with each memory we recall, but does seem to occur with relatively new consolidated material. So, ang fresh and newly encoded information nga ara sa aton long-term storage, after na ma-recall ang aton nga memory nga halin sa long-term storage, gina-consolidate na siya liwat. Amo na nga it's termed as reconsolidation, para ma-prevent ang interference or decay or madula ang memory natin. And yeah, that would be all for our reporting. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you've learned a lot from our discussion today. So thank you.